Pakistan, which remained an important ally of the United States throughout the Cold War, was the first non-NATO country to equip with the F-104 starfighter. The F-104s and Bs provided to the Pakistan Air Force (PAF) under the U.S. Mutual Defense Assistance Program entered service in 1961 and continued to fly until 1972, when dwindling spares support forced their early retirement. In all, 12 F-104s and 2 F-104Bs were transferred to Pakistan. At PAF's request, all its F-104s were refitted with the M61 Gatling 20mm gun, whereas its counterparts in the USAF had been divested of the guns on the assumption that all post-career air combat would occur at high speeds where only the wingtip-mounted Sidewinder missiles would be effective. The PAF's foresight was amply rewarded in actual combat, and the USAF too reverted to having machine guns as mandatory equipment on all its fighters in due course. The newer GWE J79-11 engine was also installed on the aircraft. This made the Pakistan F-104s somewhat unique. They had the gun, and being the lightest of F-104 series with a more advanced J79 engine, enjoyed the best thrust-to-weight ratio. The only PAF unit to be equipped with the F-104 was No. 9 Air Superiority Squadron. The squadron flies the F-16 today. The in-commission rate of the F-104 during the first 5 years of service was over 80%, and all its systems performed with high reliability. The fighter was employed in the air-to-air role by the PAF and was used extensively for aerial gunnery against both banner targets and the dart targets with excellent scores. In strafing attacks, the M61 gun was superbly accurate. The F-104 starfighters remained in service with Pakistan Air Force for 12 years and flew 11,690 hours. During the 1965 Pakistan-India War, the F-104s flew a total of 246 hours and 45 minutes, while during the 1971 war, the F-104s flew a total of 103 hours and 45 minutes. 1965 Pakistan-India War. During the 1965 war, PAF was forced to rely on its small force of F-104A starfighters as high-altitude interceptors and in its night fighting role, using the radar of its ASG-141 fire control system, in conjunction with Sidewinder air-to-air missiles. After the 1st of September, the F-104s were extremely active in air defense and air superiority operations, but of the 246 missions flown by F-104s during hostilities, 42 were at night against the IAF Canberras. The rudimentary fire control radar met the Soviet high-altitude bomber threat of the Cold War era, for which it was designed, but it could not illuminate small targets against ground clutter. The standard high-speed intercept tactic employed by PAF's F-104 pilots was to approach their targets from below, with a typical height differential of 2–3,000 feet, against a target they wished to acquire at a range of 10 to 15 kilometers. This limitation was well known to the Canberra jet bomber pilots of IAF who attacked targets in Pakistan during the 1965 war. They adopted a standard high-low-high profile to minimize the threat of interception. During most of their inbound and outbound flight over Pakistani territory, the IAF Canberras would stay below about 1,000 feet during their approach and exit phases. This posed a difficult night intercept problem. The PAF's F-104s had in these circumstances to be used in an unconventional low-altitude intercept profile that severely challenged the capabilities of its airborne radar. To pick up the low-flying bombers on their scope, the F-104 pilots had to get down to about 300 to 500 feet above the ground to point their radars upward and clear of ground clutter at the enemy bombers. The problem was aggravated by the Canberra's tail warning audio alarm that would go off the moment an F-104 got to a near astern position, and enable the bomber to take timely evasive action to shake off its pursuer. The F-104s were highly dreaded by the Indian Air Force, IAF. On the 3rd of September 1965, even before the war began, an Indian NAT surrendered to an F-104, which forced it to land at the abandoned airfield of Pasrur, in Pakistan. Its pilot squadron leader Bripal Singh Sikand became a POW. On the 6th of September, 2 starfighters were sent on dawn patrol from Sargodha. They were vectored by Sakesa radar towards 4 IAF Musters engaged in bomb and rocket attacks against a stationary passenger train at Gakar railway station. One of the F-104 pilots was forced to return to base with a radio failure, but the other pilot, Flight Lieutenant Aftab Alam Khan, dived his F-104 with full afterburners, going supersonically through the Masters formation, which promptly scattered. The Indian aircraft tried to escape at about 50 feet above the ground, but they were no match for the starfighter. Aftab destroyed one Masters with his Sidewinder missile, thus achieving one of the world's first air victories by a Mach 2 combat aircraft. The other F-104 pilot, Flight Lieutenant Amjad Khan, who had missed his chance the previous day, made amends on the 7th of September. He was scrambled in an F-104 at about 5:15 hours and directed by Sakasa radar towards an incoming raid at Sargodha. He made visual contact with the IAF Masters and headed towards them. By the time he caught up with them, the Indian aircraft was 6 to 8 miles away from Sargodha, flying at 150 to 200 feet on a southeasterly heading towards India. As the Masters jettisoned the drop tanks, Flight Lieutenant Amjad Hussain positioned himself behind one of them and released a Gar-8 missile, which went straight into the ground. The Master then began to dogfight with the starfighter, which used its superior climb and acceleration to lift the combat from ground level to about 7,000 feet to gain room for maneuver. Hussain fired his cannons and was delighted to see the shell hit the Master. The Master pilot showed commendable courage in staying with the F-104, and despite being mortally wounded, scored several cannon strikes on the starfighter. Flight Lieutenant Amjad Hussain managed to eject safely and reached his base. This was the first and only starfighter to be lost through enemy action in the 1965 war. The Indian pilot squadron leader A.B. Devaya was posthumously awarded the Mahavir Chakra in 1988, 23 years after the war, when Indian authorities learnt of the IAF pilot's valor through an account of the encounter published in John Fricke's book Battle for Pakistan, published in 1978. On the 21st of September, squadron leader Jamal A. Khan intercepted an Indian Air Force Canberra at about 33,000 feet and shot it down with a Sidewinder near Fazilka, inside Pakistani territory. The bomber's pilot, Flight Lieutenant Manmohan Low, ejected and was made POW, while its navigator, Flying Officer A.K. Kapoor, could not bail out and was killed in action. The British-made Canberra, unlike its American counterpart the Martin B-57, had no ejection seat for the navigator. This was the first kill achieved by an F-104 at night after a number of near misses due to factors described earlier. F-104s were also used during 1965 for low-level, daylight reconnaissance missions over the IAF air bases. The speed of the starfighter gave the Indians no time to react. The F-104s were also employed as escorts for the slow Lockheed RT-33 reconnaissance fighters on photographic missions deep into Indian territory, the presence of starfighters virtually guaranteeing that no air opposition would be encountered. 6 F-104 pilots received gallantry awards during the 1965 war. 1971 Pakistan-India War. Air operations in 1971 Pakistan-India War commenced with a preemptive strike by PAF. In the 1971 war, the F-104 was also used for deep penetration strikes against enemy airfields and radars. 2 F-104s each attacked Amritsar and Faridkot Indian Air Force radars. The attack on Faridkot radar was led by Wing Commander Arif Iqbal, who not only damaged the radar but also shot down an IAF Krishak aircraft. On the 4th of December, squadron leaders Amanullah and Rashid Bhatti attacked Amritsar radar. They met with stiff resistance but managed to shoot down 2 aircraft, an Indian Nat and an Su-7. The pilot of the Nat, Flight Lieutenant J. Prera, was killed in action. On the 8th of December, Flight Lieutenant Manzoor Bokhari intercepted an IAF Canberra and shot it down. On the 10th of December, Wing Commander Arif Iqbal, while attacking the Indian harbour of Oka, shot down an Alizé aircraft of Indian Navy. Its crew members, Lieutenant Commander Ashok Roy, Lieutenant H.S. Sirohi and A.C.O. Vijayan, were killed in action. PAF lost 2 F-104s along with their pilots. Wing Commander Mervyn Leslie Middlecote and Flight Lieutenant Samad Changazi both were awarded gallantry awards of Satara-e-Jarat, roughly equivalent to the British Distinguished Flying Cross. Flight Lieutenant Bharat B. Soni, a MiG-21 pilot, was credited with having shot down Wing Commander Middlecote, while Flight Lieutenant Aaron K. Dutta, another MiG-21 pilot, was awarded the claim of having shot down Flight Lieutenant Samad Changazi. The US government imposed an embargo on arms sales to both India and Pakistan as soon as the 1965 war began. No consideration was given to the fact that India, a longtime ally of the Soviet Union, hardly used any American military equipment, and the sanctions exclusively degraded the combat potential of only the Pakistani armed forces. The PAF fleet of F-104s was particularly hard hit by the arms embargoes. Eventually it became impossible to maintain a reasonable in-commission rate on the F-104s, and the PAF decided to phase it out of service in late 1972. This ended the era of Pakistan Air Force's first Mach 2 combat aircraft.